My name is Mark, and I've been a truck driver for over a decade. I've seen a lot during my years on the road, but one night truly shook me to the core. This happened a few years ago, and I still can't explain it. That evening, I was hauling cargo through one of the most desolate stretches of highway. It was around midnight, and I was getting tired. On the road, I saw a sign for a truck stop and decided to pull over. I'd stopped at similar places before. They're usually safe. But this time, something felt off. When I arrived, I noticed the parking lot was nearly empty. Normally, these stops are packed at night, but this time, I only saw 3 trucks parked far apart. I parked my rig and headed toward the building with the cafe and restrooms. Inside, it was eerily quiet. The cafe looked abandoned. Tables were dusty and the register was empty. I figured the staff must have gone to sleep and headed to the restroom. When I came back out, I noticed something strange. The parking lot was completely empty. All the trucks were gone, except mine. It didn't make sense. I'd only been inside for 10 minutes at most. I felt uneasy but tried not to panic. I decided to get back in my truck and leave. As I got into the cab, I noticed movement in my rearview mirror. Someone was standing in the shadows at the edge of the lot. It was a man, just standing there, staring at me. I turned on my headlights, and the beam illuminated him. He had this unsettling smile, cold, unnatural. I started the engine, but nothing happened. The truck wouldn't start. I turned the key again and again, but it was no use. The man began walking toward me, slowly, as if he knew I couldn't go anywhere. I locked the doors and turned on the central lock. That's when he raised his hand, and I saw he was holding a crowbar. He reached the cab and started banging on the window. His face still had that horrifying smile. I tried calling the police, but there was no signal. At that moment, I noticed more people emerging from the shadows. They were slowly approaching my truck. I didn't have time to think. I turned the ignition one more time, and suddenly the engine roared to life. I slammed my foot on the gas, and the truck lurched forward. The man managed to strike the glass with his crowbar, leaving a deep crack, but I sped away. I didn't stop for hours until I reached the next town. There, I reported what had happened to the police. When they investigated the truck stop, they told me it had been abandoned for years. Since that night, I've never slept at empty truck stops. If a place feels too quiet, it's better to keep moving. Sometimes, silence is far more dangerous than it seems. This happened back in 2017. My name is Mike, and I've been a truck driver for over a decade. At the time, I was hauling cargo from Chicago, Illinois, to Seattle, Washington. It was a long haul along Interstate 90, known for its desolate stretches, especially through South Dakota. I was used to the loneliness of the road, but that night is something I'll never forget. It was late, around 1 a.m. The road was empty, and my truck's headlights illuminated only the endless strip of highway and the occasional road sign. I was listening to the radio, trying to stay awake, when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. A vehicle was approaching fast. It was an old SUV, maybe a Chevrolet Blazer. When it pulled alongside my truck, the driver began flashing their high beams, as if trying to get my attention. At first, I thought they had a problem. Maybe something was wrong with my truck. I slowed down to let them pass, but instead, the SUV matched my speed and stayed beside me. I glanced over at the driver's window. The person was wearing a hood, and their face was hard to see. They stared directly at me, unblinking, then suddenly swerved toward my truck, trying to force me off the road. My heart stopped. I jerked the wheel to avoid them and sped up, but the SUV followed. They kept flashing their lights, closing the distance, then backing off, almost as if they were playing a game. At one point, they pulled up next to me again, and I heard something heavy hit my door. When I checked later, I saw it had left a dent. That's when I realized this wasn't just an aggressive driver. Whoever was behind the wheel wanted to scare me, or worse. After about 10 minutes of this madness, I saw an exit sign for a truck stop. I decided to take the exit, hoping there would be other people around, but the SUV followed me. When I pulled into the brightly lit truck stop, I saw several other rigs parked there. Only then did the SUV stop, turn around, and disappear back into the night. I went straight into the gas station building and told the cashier what had happened. He looked concerned and said, "You're not the first person to tell me a story like this. Several truckers have mentioned a strange SUV chasing them on this stretch of the highway." I called the police, and officers arrived about 20 minutes later. They took my statement but suggested it might just be a case of road rage. Still, there was doubt in their voices. Later, I heard from other drivers that a few years earlier, back in 2014, there had been several disappearances on that section of I-90. Neither the vehicles nor the drivers were ever found. The only common thread was reports of a dark SUV seen before the incidents. Since that night, I've avoided driving that stretch of road after dark. For me, Interstate 90 is more than just a highway. It's a reminder that the scariest things on the road aren't supernatural, but the people who at first glance seem perfectly ordinary. This is a story about a truck driver named Tom Whitaker. He claims that what happened to him on a deserted highway forever changed his attitude toward night drives. The story sounds too strange to be made up, but Tom insists that everything happened exactly as he recounts. Tom was hauling a load to the other side of the state. It was close to midnight, and the road was empty. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. The night was unusually dark. There were no stars, no moon. Driving through yet another stretch of highway, he noticed a figure on the shoulder of the road in the distance. It was a person, standing motionless, raising a hand as if hitchhiking. Tom rarely picked up hitchhikers, but there was something so strange about this figure that he couldn't ignore it. As he got closer, the person looked exhausted. Their clothes were dirty, and their face was pale. Tom rolled down his window and asked, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" "I just need a ride to the next gas station," the hitchhiker replied in a low, calm voice. Tom hesitated but nodded, opening the door. The person climbed into the cab without saying another word, sitting with their arms crossed. A cold chill seemed to emanate from them, as if they had just stepped out of a freezer. Tom tried to start a conversation. "Were you stranded here? This place seems completely deserted." The hitchhiker remained silent, staring straight ahead. Tom felt uneasy, but decided not to push. They drove in silence. A few minutes later, Tom noticed something strange. When he glanced in the rearview mirror, there was nothing behind them. But the hitchhiker's figure wasn't reflected in the mirror. Panic gripped him, but he tried not to show it. Suddenly, the hitchhiker turned to him. Their eyes were empty, devoid of life. "You shouldn't have picked me up," they said softly. Tom slammed on the brakes. He turned to look, but the hitchhiker had vanished. The cab was empty, except for dirty footprints on the seat, proof that someone had been there. Wasting no time, Tom jumped out of the truck and scanned the road. There was no one there. Only the wind carried dust along the highway. He climbed back into the truck, started the engine, and drove the rest of the way without stopping. When he reached a gas station, the cashier turned pale after hearing his story. "You saw him? People have been talking about that man for years. They say he died in an accident here while trying to hitch a ride. Now he shows up on the highway and, well, you've seen for yourself." Since then, Tom has never picked up a hitchhiker, especially at night. For him, the highway remains the scariest place, and those few minutes with the hitchhiker are something he'll never forget.